Welcome to Live Your Best Midlife. I'm your host, Jill Lewis. Join me for inspiring pep talks and expert interviews as we explore staying active, feeling great, and embracing midlife adventures. Whether you're an empty nester, a pickleball enthusiast, or just ready to rediscover your vibrant self, this podcast is for you. Let's make our mid-years our best years. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is your host, Jill Lewis. Today, I'm going to be joined by Catherine Hickem. Catherine is the founder of an organization called Parenting Adult Children Today. This is an organization that equips parents with the tools needed to love their adult children. She is a psychotherapist. She's an executive coach with a BS in counseling and has an MS in clinical social work. She's the author of Regret-Free Parenting and Heaven in Her Arms. I'm so excited to bring her on to the podcast. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. And tell me, first of all, where are you calling in from?
I'm actually in Atlanta.
Atlanta. Oh, my daughter lives in Atlanta. How fun.
Yeah,
I was just there this past month. So yeah, it is a booming place. My goodness, is it crowded?
It really is. I live out in the suburbs, so I'm not having to deal with it on a daily basis, which makes it a lot more comfortable for me.
For sure. Yeah. She lives over by Truist Park. So that's nice. It's nice. It's not as crazy as well. Okay. You are here today to talk with me and my listeners about parenting adult children. For reference, my kids are all in their 20s. They're 28, 26, and 22. So this definitely is a newer role for me. None of them are married. None of them have kids. Knock on wood, life's going right now. But I love having these kinds of conversations because I know at some point we're going to go through some maybe times that aren't as rosy. And I definitely want to be prepared and knowing like how I'm communicating with them, that I'm doing the right things as a mom. I think we're all like so well prepared for what to expect in those first 18 years. And then after that, it's, wait a minute, what? Give me a little bit. I gave them a little bit of your background and the degrees that you hold, but how did you get into this?
Well, it actually started when I was young. And so I'll give you two quick stories.
Perfect.
One was when I was 5. My father was a minister, and I was at a church service one night. My mother was sick, and I got up to take a little girl to the bathroom who was visiting. I didn't know who she was, and she leaned over and she said, "Do you know where the bathroom is?" And so I said, "I will show you." So I take her out and come back. And as I'm coming back in, my father says, "Kathy Taylor, you sit down and don't you ever do that again," in front of the entire congregation. If the earth could have opened up and swallowed me whole, I would have welcomed that, because that was a public shaming.
Yeah.
That really just impacted me deeply. And part of it was because he changed after that. The nurturing father that had been the storyteller at night stopped. And from that moment on, he became a very strong disciplinarian, not the warm, gentle father that I had. So my life changed from that event. And I tried again at 15 to have a relationship with him. I made an appointment with the secretary and went in, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I've come to talk about a relationship. I want to be close to you." And he threw me out of the office. And
Oh my gosh.
"Go home. We'll talk about it later," which we never had to talk until I was 25. And at 25, at that point, I was married. I'd had several years of therapy. I was a therapist. And I said, "Dad, I want to have a talk again." And so in that conversation, he owned his stuff. And he said, "Catherine, I did not do a very good job with you. And I'm so sorry. And I give you my word that moving forward, I'm going to be the dad that you need, not the dad that you had."
Wow.
So that was a redemptive story for me, right? About that time, I become a parent. And in the midst of all of that, I start repeating some of the lessons that I learned, which was you to be seen and not heard, or I was more attentive than my parents. But it wasn't until I actually came home and homeschooled that I realized I was so busy helping the world as a therapist and a minister's wife and all those things. I was not looking at my own children. And coming home really awakened to me to all the areas that I needed to work on, and all the ways that I was repeating the mistakes of my parents. So I began to do the work, and it changed my parenting. It changed me. And I began to look around and said, other people are struggling too. Fast forward again, my practice became focused on parenting. And I had a parenting organization, and I just felt like we were missing out as a culture on we were raising children from performance, achievement, and behavior instead of heart and character. And so if we took care of the heart and character, then what would happen, the other things would fall into place. Then my children during that season started to grow, and I began to hear these parents that I had developed just relationships with because of all the other parenting work that I had done. They naturally kept coming to me saying, what do I do here? What do I do there? And I really just could see that we have a major problem, that we're not supporting parents who are having to go and do a 180 in their parenting. And
Mm.
the last story I'll tell you is that this young man said to me, he was a friend of my daughter's, and he said to me, Mrs. Hickem, did you know you're the only parent of my friends where your child is the same in front of your face as he is behind your back? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah. And I said, what about you? And he said, oh, no, I'm not the same either. And I said, what's that about? And he said, I learned a long time ago that my parents want me to be who they want me to be. And he said, so when I go home, I just become who they want me to be because if I don't, my mother cries, my dad gets mad. And he said, but when I walk out the door, I go back to being myself.
Wow. Oh, I felt that so deep. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was
Oh my
painful.
goodness.
Painful.
Yes.
And what I began to see and hear was that our children are living double lives in this culture as they have learned what pleases the parent and they have learned what doesn't please the parent. And therefore, they don't want to deal with all the parent management that will come if they're truthful, if they're vulnerable, if they
Hmm.
say, this is who I am. There's a tremendous amount of fear in adult children to be truly honest with their parents. So therefore, they aren't. And I would tell you, I know I've seen the statistics. A good number of adult children do not share the things that are going on in their parents' lives. And there's many reasons for that, but it's because they're overwhelmed by the circumstances they're in, but they don't want to deal with the pain, the disappointment, the rejection, all the stuff that goes with the parents really seeing who they are versus who they want them to be.
Man, wow. I am like, that is, I feel that just for myself. I look back on my own. I'm just so reflective in everything you're saying. I'm just like, wow, I'm the youngest of five. I've always felt I was so different, not better. I always felt like there was something a little bit off or wrong with me growing up because I thought I'm so different from everybody else in the family. And I totally always felt like I lived a double life. I was always, who I was with my friends was completely different than who I was with my family. And I still am that way today. That's so interesting that you said that. That really struck me, and I've never had someone put it in words like that before. So thank you. That was really impactful to me. Let me take that back for just a second. When you said so parenting for with love and character, and you said as opposed to performance, and what were those other
Achievement and behavior.
that's right, achievement and behavior. I'm writing that down. Yeah, I think that is something that I think as my own parenting skills, it's hard to not, you want them to how other people see them. You feel like that's a reflection then also on you. And I think that's so hard as a parent to not fall into that trap.
No, I would agree with you, but that's also it's a burden for you as a parent because if
Yeah.
you're going to take responsibility for all your children's mistakes, that means you have to
Yes.
take responsibility for all their successes.
Yeah.
So it's the same coin. So either we really let them be who they are for all the lessons they get to learn and all the successes they get to have, or we're going to really interfere with that developmental process because when we jump in, we are actually undermining their growth,
Yes.
right?
Yes. It's so easy to always, just keep looking back and looking back on my own parenting style when the kids were when I was a bigger presence in their life and when they were living here and wanted to solve all the problems for them. I didn't want them to have to experience pain and any kind of suffering. And I always joked and said, I have the playbook of teenage years. Here it is. This is, if you do this, they'll do that. And they never listen because they need to experience it themselves.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge, right? Is that
Mhm.
there is this tension between us wanting to be close and them wanting their independence.
For sure.
And those are two longings that can live in the same room.
Yeah. That was actually my next question for you was just talking about finding the line between being supportive and being controlling now when we're with the adult children. Some of my listeners have kids that are their adult kids or could be their neighbors and living in the same town, and others their families are living on a different part of the country. But I think it's really hard to find that balance of boundaries versus control, especially when they're making choices that we wouldn't make.
And see, this issue of control is about our fear. So I have
Yeah.
to get really honest, really fast on that. Anytime we're controlling, it's because we have some internal anxiety about the outcome. And so we have to make some decisions about what are we going to do with our fears? Because my fear is my problem. And I really don't have any right to hand my fear over to them. But when I become controlling, I am basically handing them my problem. And so, therefore, I've got to get really clear about what it means to be really clean. You know what I mean? Because if I don't want them to think that I don't believe in them or that I don't think that they can figure it out, then I have to really pay attention to what am I bringing to the relationship.
Mm.
We bring baggage that we don't even realize that we have, and it can come in the form of control, come in the expectations, come in the form of dreams, like what are for them. And when we hold on to those, that's about us. That's not about them.
So true. It's so true. What, I mean, the role of being a mom or a dad, it's evolving, obviously. And it's something that when you have kids, you don't think about how your role is going to evolve. Like that is not even crossing your mind when you have little toddlers running around. But I have seen so many women really struggle to redefine their role once their kids are adults. I coach women in health and wellness, and sometimes the things that they're telling me that's going on, and I hear a lot of them are just depressed at this stage of life because, and I think it's because they haven't found a new purpose or they feel like they've lost that purpose. So,
Yep.
what does healthy parenting, what does that look like in this new season? How can we let go without like feeling disconnected and still understanding like we're still their mother. They still need us. It's a different type of need, but I guess that's a lot of questions in one.
I think you hit on a really important point, and that is many people do not know who they are outside of a role in which they function. And the truth is, we are bigger than that. We
Yeah.
are more. I was valuable before I served a purpose in someone else's life. My,
Wow. Say that again. That was so good.
I was valuable before I served a purpose in other people's lives. So my value is bigger than the role of being a mom or the role of being a provider or the role of being a teacher, whatever role you want to throw. That is something I do. But the real question is, who are we? Who was I created to be? Because that's in childhood, they're just evolving, they're just becoming. They don't know all the expectations that are coming their way from the world and other people. And so when a child is in their purest form, it's just so delightful to watch because there's an innocence and there's a curiosity and there's this excitement about life and being, right?
Yes.
Life goes on, that begins to go away because we begin to get messages about who we aren't, what we can do, what we can't do. And all these messages then begin to we allow them to define us because we don't know any better. But what happens as parents is that we allow our identity to be based upon a job or a role and not on who we are. And that's why our children were never created for the purpose of filling the entire whole of our heart. They're to feel a part of it. But when our whole happiness is based upon them, Don't kid yourself to think they don't feel the pressure of that. They most certainly do. And this is one of the reasons why they pull back because they can't handle all the things that they're learning about themselves, their lives, the complications of having to deal in this culture and deal with having to meet the needs of a parent whose sole focus has been them. It's a heavy
Yeah.
burden actually to put on them if our entire happiness is only about how well they're doing or how well they're not doing.
Gosh, it's so true. What ways, or I would say maybe what changes do we need to make in the way that we communicate with adult kids to build mutual respect instead of falling back into old parent child dynamics?
That's a very long question that we probably have a lot of content on that one. Here's what I will tell you.
Okay.
One of the very first things we could do is pay attention to how we ask questions. Sometimes we can ask a question and we have really good intentions, but if we're not paying attention to the tone and the pace, then it can look like an inquisition. It's not looking as if it's we're interested. It looks like we're coming at them like from a place of fear, and their very lives are going to be dependent upon how they answer.
Yeah.
We have to pay attention to the nuances because they know us really well, right? When they were growing up in our homes, our tone of voice determined how serious we were. If we used their name in a particular way, if we said John Mark versus Hey John, can you come here? They knew when they were in trouble or when we were just needed help or whatever. So they're very in tune to us. And so we've got to recognize that the ways that they read us very much impact how they interpret us now.
Mm,
And they'll resort back to acting 10 if we talk to them as if they're 10.
yeah.
Or they could then rebel and get really angry, which tells you they're scared. So again, when they start to get angry, just remember they're fearful. And the real curiosity for us is important to say, what is it that they're fearful of? And maybe you stop the conversation and say, hey, can we have a timeout? Something I just said seemed to trigger you, and I am really sorry about that. So, can we talk about that trigger and what this means to you? Because I don't want to do that to you. And clearly, something in our past has brought us to this place. So,
Yeah.
what do we need to do in order to clear the slate on this?
Yeah. So it sounds like one, it's self-awareness. I think a lot of it is just looking inward and having some self-awareness to know like how you're speaking to them. So look more into yourself and your tone and all that. But and then just the ability to immediately be like, take some ownership and not push blame, to take ownership and just say, oh, hey, I'm so sorry. I did not, something I did there was not cool. Let me back up and let's talk
Yeah,
about
can I
that.
get a do-over?
Absolutely.
And they want us to quote care enough to quote get through the challenge to the other side, right?
Hmm.
Care enough to own our stuff, right? They will go, oh wow, they really do care because they just own. I can honestly tell you, I remember the first time my dad told me he was sorry, and when the first time my mother told me she was sorry. My dad, I was 15 when my dad said it to me, and it had to do with a football score. And my mother, I was 18. That's how much it stands out in my mind. That was the first time I'd ever heard it. Or if we can be vulnerable with our kids, then that they're going to want to be vulnerable with us. It's if we're trying to quote always come across as if we have our acts together all the time. I can tell you right now, you're never going to really know them ever. And they've lived with us, so they know we don't have our acts together. But you know, we often can become really great pretenders. So the one of the other things I think we have to be really careful is that we don't assume. And I think because we're parents we've known them their whole lives, we can make some pretty big assumptions. And we assume that we know them. We assume we know what they like and how they think. But when they leave home, there's a lot that's going on in that little brain of theirs that you and I aren't privy to, that causes them to evolve and to change and to grow in ways that they may not have revealed to us yet. So we have to be really careful. We're not making decisions that impact them based upon the first 18 years of their lives. We have to really get in touch with, does this work for you now? And when we make assumptions, that's usually when we get into trouble.
You know how eating healthy can start to feel, I don't know, how do you say it, a little too clean? That is why I keep Flavor God seasonings stocked in my kitchen. They make boring meals crave-worthy again. All their blends are gluten-free, they're low sodium, and they're made with real ingredients. You know how important that is to me. But the flavors are so good. Okay, I love the everything, I love the garlic lovers, and the Taco Tuesday. But let me tell you, the honey barbecue and the pizza seasoning are total game changers too. So if you want your healthy food to taste amazing, head to Flavor God and use the code Jill for a discount. Check out the show notes today for the Flavor God website, the code Jill on how to get a discount. It's flavor without the guilt, just the way we like it. It's funny. My daughter and I, we talk she's 22. She's out of college. She's got her first job, and we talk all the time in various ways, though. And so social media can be awful, but it can also be great. I have found for me, the joy is when the kids share a funny Instagram reel with me, or if I share one with them, it's like this fun little way of, it's like a touch point that even though I'm not talking to them on a daily basis, there's some little touch points there. But my daughter sent one that cracked me up, and I thought, man, I wish was self-aware enough of this back in the day to tell them this. But it was an Instagram reel where like a woman was talking to her kid and someone asked her something and she says, "What?" like really sharp, and then follows it up with, and then she says it in a much nicer way. And it was like, oh, when you realize your mom was just overstimulated, she wasn't actually angry with you. She was just like really overstimulated. And I thought, oh my gosh, and my daughter sent that kind of just like laughing, like she saw that and it resonated with her. So she sent it to me in a funny way. Oh yeah, I get it now. There were times where you weren't angry, you weren't upset. You were just, there's too many things going on. And one person, it was just too many questions coming at you at once. And I think, oh, so now that's like our big thing we say, I'm just overstimulated right now. I wish I had those words to use back then because I want to tell all my kids, like, I'm sorry for you. If I probably sounded so sharp so many times when I wasn't, in fact, mad. There's just too many things happening.
You were in survival mode, right?
Yes.
Eating 1,000 plates and trying to make them all spin.
But I think it's interesting though, as a parent now, I feel like there's just so many ways that you can be in touch with your children and adult children and communicate with them, that I do think it makes it so much easier than like back in the day when it was either a formal visit to your parents or you were a phone call, which was expensive and was awkward, or a letter. You didn't have as many opportunities to make it more casual. That's what I like about the relationship with my kids. I feel like it's just so much more with my adult kids. It's just so much more casual and friendly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. And that's a gift of living in this time, right? It's that sense of we can feel connected even if we can't see them. But that connection is based upon the relationship. It's
Yeah.
based upon the trust. It's based upon, do they let us know them? Those are really important variables that determine how much of them they'll share with us. And that's important.
It is. On the flip side, when things aren't going well, what do you say to people when you're dealing with disappointment that sometimes comes when adult children, either they're not calling you or they're not sharing anything or they're living differently than you had hoped?
I think one element that no one really talks about in parenting adult children is the element of grief. I think grief is a really important thing we have to pay attention to. And I don't mean it talking about death. I'm talking about disappointment,
Yeah.
dreams that you may have had that will not happen. And it could be something as simple as maybe you thought you were going to be a grandparent and your child decides that they're not going to have children. It could be the idea that your whole life they were headed this way, or maybe I'll give you a quick example. My son, it was not affectionate from the time he was 8 to 18. He did not spontaneously hug me.
Hmm.
Now, I would hug him, And at about 15, I started teasing him about not hugging me. But he was just not an affectionate. The only hope I ever had that my son would be affectionate was how he would handle the cat. That was it. That's the only affection I ever saw of him. And I had all these friends whose sons would just hang all over them, just all the time. And he was not that way. I knew he was someone who was going to walk to the tune of a different drummer, and that part of that drumming included not being affectionate. And so there was a part of me that was sad that I didn't have the son that I saw from so many other friends and their sons. I grieved it. I grieved that part of our relationship so that way I could let it go and I could accept him for who he was instead of who I wanted him to be. But I had to grieve the fact this was something I just wasn't going to experience. At least that's what I thought at the time. I'm happy to say that at the age of 41, he is far more affectionate when we're together. And he lives in Singapore, so I don't get a chance to see him often.
Oh, yeah.
But what I will tell you that when we're together now, he's very frequent with his hugs and his touches.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was definitely, there are elements
Yeah.
of parenting that we have to do the work of grieving that, they may have married somebody that we didn't think was the person we thought they would marry. So we have to grieve that. So we don't punish the person and punish our child for the decision that they made. There's just different things that come up that we have to let go of. But the only way we can really let go of them is to grieve the loss and the sense of sadness. So that way we really can have a pure heart and not carry the baggage with us to that relationship.
When you say, like, when you grieve that, what did that look like for you? Like, how do you, when you say grieve, other just feeling sad about it and allowing yourself to
I
feel
would,
that?
yeah, I would acknowledge it. I might
Mhm.
journal about it.
Okay.
I might talk to a friend and say, hey,
Mm,
I need to let this go, but I need to say it out loud to hear myself say it.
yeah.
And, so I would journal, I would talk about it. When my son was at his best friend's wedding, we were all there because we were at his best friend's wedding and it came time for that mother-son dance. I also knew that wasn't going to be mine either. I started to cry. And his back is to me, so he doesn't see me crying. And my daughter reaches over, grabs my hand. She knows why I'm crying
Mm,
because she knows that will never be me. And I gave myself permission to cry. I didn't make a big scene, but I
right.
just grieved it. And I said, okay, Kath, let it go. You've,
Yeah.
it is. Fast forward, 4 years later, he gets married in Singapore or in Malaysia. It's an Asian wedding. There is no mother son dance.
Yeah.
Right. I'm glad I grieved it because
Yeah.
when it came time for his moment to come, I had let go of all my expectations. So
Yeah.
fully embrace every part of this new experience, this new opportunity, this new relationship with no looking back over what I thought it was going to be. So I was so glad I had done the work 4 years earlier. So I wasn't comparing what I thought to, I could just receive and experience and enjoy. So that's the thing. It's like it can look different depending on the severity. I think depends on how much energy you've put in a particular basket will determine how the kind of grief that you have. But it's important that we acknowledge loss.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
but it's also not their problem. Our losses about their lives are should not be their problem. Those are
Mhm.
our issues. And that's why I say when we're looking at parenting with adult children, we have to remember this stuff is about us.
Yeah.
Our stuff gets in the way of how we parent because all that we bring to the relationship. It gets much easier when we're pretty pure and clean with our junk and we're not dragging it with us. We can be more nimble and more adaptable and more aware of how we're going to connect to them. So we need to do our own work so our stuff doesn't translate over to being a problem for them.
Absolutely. It's interesting how, too, every family is different and what works in one doesn't necessarily work in another. And I'm sure there is no one size fits all to any of this.
Right.
And what one person's problems might look like a cakewalk to somebody else's family, you know? So it's interesting in that way, too. If a grown child is facing challenges. Like it could be your career or marriage falling apart, mental health, like whatever. What do you think? This is, I know this is tough because, like I just said, everyone's different, but the best way for parents to help without enabling.
First of all, it goes back that we don't assume. We stay curious. You can ask the question, look, I can see you're really going through a really tough time. What would support look like for you right now?
I like that question. What
And
would
then what it
support?
does is that it lets them, and they're probably not going to be able to answer it quickly because it's probably loaded for them in terms of it could come, they could have 100 different answers. And they may say, I have no idea, and say, you know what, it's okay that you don't know. I'm going to check back with you in a few days. And I
Hmm.
just want you to know I'm here. And if you can think through some things that we could be supportive in, we want to know what those are because we don't want you to feel alone. And what would it look like for you not to feel alone
Mm.
while you walk through this next season? And there's no telling what that could look like. And but as parents, we have to be ready. When we have these open-ended questions, we may get some pretty big answers. So we have to have some our own internal boundaries of what do I really mean by that? We need to like not give them a blank check and then all of a sudden they take it to the bank and then there's nothing in the bank. So we have to
Mhm.
pay attention to how we ask the question. But
So true.
I like to ask what does support look like because then I lets me hear probably a lot of different ways and I may be able to do some things and I may not be able to do some things. Like my supporting my son when he's in Singapore looks very different than how I can support my daughter who lives an hour from me.
Yes.
So I have to be really clear on what are the options available to me with a son that lives on the other side of the world. And that's important for me to know. And that's what I will say that to him. How can I support you right now? What does that mean?
Mm.
And just because it shows honor, it's saying, I know that you know yourself better than I know you. I'm here. I want to come alongside. That's important for them to know.
How important do you think it is for, in terms of if you have multiple children, multiple adult children, and how you're helping them, whether with time or financial help, stability, whatever, that it's so equal? I've heard stories of families that are everything is to the penny, everything is so equal. I've heard stories of families that are just like one of them is doing great, so they're focusing more time and monetary support to another. Do you think either is better than the other, or is it just an individual thing and it's again goes back to communication? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I One of the questions I would ask a family is when you look back, was there one child who had a tendency to take all the air out of the room? Okay. And you'd be surprised at the number of people who would say yes. Okay. So if that's been the case, then there could have been some jealousy in the childhood years. So if there was jealousy in the childhood years, you're going to want to pay attention to how you meet needs and bless children now. That could be a very sensitive subject. And so I think we can't, we have to be able to understand everybody's kid needs are different. But if there's imbalance, that's when there'll be some challenges. I'm not going to just say, I'll do this for all three of them. And it's that they're all going to get the same dress. It may look like one might be red, one might be green, and one might be blue, whatever, gift card, whatever, how you're doing it. But the real question is, do I know them and what they're like? How do I say I know them and how I like help them? And some kids are going to have challenges that are more expensive. I'll give you an example. My daughter has had some significant health issues, right? And so that in my head has been a priority because this is about her very being. I'm fortunate that Taylor has not had health problems, but that doesn't mean I couldn't support him in another way because he had another opportunity. So I could help him with that opportunity that on his own he probably wouldn't have done. But I said, hey, how about I come along and support you here? And he was very appreciative. Mom, you don't have to do that. No, I don't have to, but I want to do that. So we, life circumstances often dictate how we can give and how we can support. I'm very aware that there has to be a certain degree of balance if there was any question in childhood that things were imbalanced because
Yeah,
there's wounds from that past experience that may not have been healed that can carry over into the sibling relationship they have now and their relationship with us as parents that they could have now if those issues were not addressed back then.
I think that is really good advice. Yeah, I liked your answer a lot. How can parents of adult kids find peace if they wish they'd done things differently when their children were younger?
Boy, that's an important question because I hear that a lot, right? No, I didn't have my act together when they were younger and I really made some mistakes. And so, okay, so which ones are you most concerned about? So I'll ask the question, which ones are you most concerned about? And then they'll tell me, I'll say, okay, are you seeing any results of how those choices you were making impacted your kids now? And some of them will say yes, and some of them will say no. And I'll say, okay, the best thing to do is to go back and to have this conversation and say, this is about me, this isn't about you. I realized looking back, I'm working on self-awareness, and I realized I made some mistakes when I was parenting you. And I'm struggling with that. And I just need to know, is there anything that I need to apologize for with you? That hurt you that I may not have awareness of? Or do you remember when we were going through this season and I was working two jobs and I missed some of your events? And, I want to talk about that because I'm sure that hurt you. And I'm so sorry that hurt you. That breaks my heart. That was not my intention, but it doesn't change the fact that was probably hard for you. Acknowledging how they could have been impacted. And they may look, say, Mom, you're making a big deal over nothing. I'm great. And that's fine. But at least if you go and say, I've really been doing some soul searching and I'm really wanting to get my act together. And I'm struggling with recognizing there are some areas of my life that I didn't do well. And I'll tell you, like when I went home to homeschool. It was about me learning about the things that I was missing. And I'd missed some key things. I'd missed that my son had an auditory processing disorder. I was accusing him of not listening to me. The truth is,
Mhm.
he couldn't hear because he couldn't hear with background noise on. So if the fan was on or noise from the TV, he couldn't hear. And I punished him. And I actually told him as we were headed to the audiologist, I said, you better pray that you're deaf because if you're not, you are in deep doo-doo with me. Only for him to be deaf. You know what I mean? It was like very humbling. But I missed out on some key things with my daughter too. It's like I had not been emotionally present for her. Like she would come up between subjects when I was homeschooling and want a hug. And I'd hug her and send her back her way. And I remember it was when I kept thinking, my God, this is a needy kid. What is wrong with her? And I heard this voice say in my head, she didn't have enough of you. And I'm like, oh, crud. So what do I do? And then I heard the voice again say, why don't you tell her the next time she hugs you that she has to let go first?
Oh, I love that.
And so I did. I pulled her aside and I said, Tiff, I am so sorry. I said, I have really missed some things with you. And I said, so from here on out, when we hug, you have to let go first. And she said, really, Mom? And I said, yeah, really. And so she tried it for several times to see if that was true. Fast forward, she's 16. We're standing in the kitchen. She comes in from high school, comes in, hugs me. We stand in the kitchen and she holds on to me for 17 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry.
No words, no words, just holding me. And I'm holding her back and she finally lets go and she kisses me and she says, thanks, Mom, I love you, and walks away. A couple days later, she came and she says, I want to talk to you about that was about in the kitchen. And it was about a friend who had made a choice that her friend really regretted. And the friend thought they wouldn't be friends because of this choice she made. She says, I was so hurt that she would think that I couldn't be her friend because of a decision. And she said, I didn't know what to do with that. And she said, But just knowing I could come home and know that I could find grounding again. She said that helped me figure out what I needed to do and what I needed to say. And to this day, I make her let go first.
Oh my gosh, that is so precious. What a great story. Oh, all right, Catherine, I think that's a great one to end on. This has been really helpful for me, so I know it has been for all of the listeners out there. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Tell my listeners where they can find you, the best places to go for all of your information.
Okay. I am on TikTok,
Okay.
parenting adult child with the number two and the letter D for today, parenting adult children today. That's my website. I'm on Instagram. I have a newsletter that if when people sign up, they get a free video series on how to talk to your adult children.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And where can they find that on
That's
your
parenting adult child today website.
parenting adult? Is it adult child or adult children today?
Adult children, parenting adult
Parent.
children today.co.
Okay. Perfect. I'll put that in the show notes. And then your TikTok, was that parenting adult children with the number two or just the
Number
word
two.
today?
Yeah, just the
Number
number two
two.
and the letter D.
Got it.
And I'm
Perfect.
on Instagram under just Catherine Hickem, I think, or parenting adult children today.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And everybody go find her, go to her website. Again, you can find that in the show notes in today's episode, and you can get that free information that she has. So thank you so much, Catherine. Enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. You have a great week.
All right, you too.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Your Best Midlife. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit that follow button. And if you want to help more people discover my podcast, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a rating and a review. Your feedback not only brightens my day, but it helps others to find my show. And if you're craving some more behind the scenes action, follow me on TikTok at Jill Lewis Living or on Instagram at Jill B. Lewis.